The party feels obligated to say something about the current condition of the Barbados economy. We have been preaching for a long time, but other local, regional, international economists, institutions have all been saying that Barbados is in difficulty. So this afternoon we gathered to allow the members of the party, especially the younger economists, to carry this fight. I'll be here, but we want this focus to be on Marsha and Ryan, who have an awful lot to say and to do and to plan ahead for the future. So I invite Marsha to have her opening remarks.
Thank you, good afternoon, and thanks to the members of the media for coming. We think that this latest IMF press release, which comes at the end of the last Article 4 consultation, shows clearly that, notwithstanding what the Minister of Finance would like to suggest, shows clearly that Barbados is even in further decline. Now, the IMF press release has said that the program that government introduced in its last budget has failed on every front. It has failed to close the deficit as was anticipated. It has, in fact, taken the Barbados economy into a further recession. We have seen that over the last decade, the best we've been able to do in terms of growth has been last year, which was 1.6%. And in fact, growth has already started to decline. And so the NSRL and the attendant suite of policies have in fact created what is essentially a trinity of failure. It has failed to boost reserves, it has failed to address the deficit, it has failed to bring about real growth in the country. And so the IMF press release joins the last Doing Business report. It joins, in fact, the acting governor of the central bank's own recent assessment in showing that the Barbados economy continues to be in trouble. The management of it does not have much credibility. And it is time for us as a country to be as concerned as all national and regional and international institutions and experts have shown themselves to be. Ryan?
All right. Hi, good afternoon. Thanks, Marsha. Thanks, Clay. My perspective on the IMF release after the Article 4 consultation pretty much echoes much of what Marsha would have mentioned just now. However, as I look at the broader perspective, and I get really concerned because last year, during the fourth quarter, this country lost 4 weeks of reserves. 4 weeks. During October, November, and December of last year. There's nothing within the trajectory of Barbados today that suggests that a similar performance will not occur this year. And so having introduced a suite of measures designed specifically, as Marsha mentioned, to one, boost reserves, reduce the deficit as well as the national debt in general, and to generate growth, I'm again concerned. And so having heard just a couple of weeks ago that we had 8.6 weeks of reserves at the end of September, and with a similar performance anticipated for the last quarter of this year, then it tells me that the report, in essence, confirms that Barbados is again going down a slide, something that has not been adequately corrected or adjusted on the part of the government. But the thing that really concerns me, and I just want us to remind ourselves that cost of living was job number 1, number 2, and number 3 of this government. And since July of this year, every single Barbadian would have seen a substantial increase in their cost of living. And this is after 9.5 years of burdensome taxation, indifferent government, to the extent that the quality of public services being provided, and I say that with a pinch of salt because the state of the roads suggests that there's nothing happening there. But the quality of the public services acts being delivered by government, given the level of taxation, is scandalous. And so therefore, asking people now to make these sacrifices, which we all have, we've paid the taxes, we've not seen any improvement in the quality of provision of public services, but yet the very targets that they indicated were vital to achieving stability are all going in the wrong direction. So the simple question is this: how many plans does it take before Barbadians realize that the government is incompetent? How many plans does it take for Barbadians to realize that this is a road leading to nowhere? How many plans does it take before the electorate and this country stands for Barbados? Barbados has been good to all of us. And as candidates, as Barbadians, I am concerned about the trajectory of this economy. And the reality is that growth will only return to this economy when the policies that are put in place ensures that households can be comfortably looked after financially, young people getting work, and that is something that the Barbados Labour Party has consistently been focused on. This report, not yet the full assessment, is probably the most damning piece of evidence. Because last year, the IMF said we had turned the corner. And I recall the government's interpretation of turning the corner was that they were on the right track. But this report now shows you which corner we actually turned last year, because all of the metrics compared to last year are worse. And so therefore, we now have to be very clear in our minds. These policies are leading us nowhere. Thank you.
I think it's, as Ryan suggested, it's very important to note that this is a press release by the International Monetary Fund that is coming at the end of an Article 4 consultation. This is not the report. And already it is quite resolute in suggesting that, in its assessment, that these policies have failed. This is something that we don't normally see from this institution. This is already a judgment, even while we wait for the Article 4 report to be released. And so, as Ryan says, it's quite damning, and it should flag for all Barbadians that there's no longer, if there ever was, any credibility in this government's capacity to set and implement policy that's going to put Barbados on the right track. You take questions
Well,
now?
I have a question.
Yeah, we take questions.
We just learned also that the government was implementing the Barbados Sustainable Recovery Plan. You know, this should be, and it's being touted as one of those plans that should correct the situation that we're now facing fiscal.
You mean how the budget was touted as one of those plans that should correct the fiscal situation? Look, I think Ryan said it in his response. This is now perhaps recovery plan number. You should be able to count and tell us, because you are there for the announcement of all of them. Notwithstanding the fact that the social partnership has been involved in this last plan, the fact is that the reason it is called the executive is that these government are the ones who are meant to execute. So while we lean on all of the best minds and the best will and commitment of the private sector and of the unions and of civil society to put their strength and their thinking and their elbow grease behind what ends up in a sustainable recovery plan, We have seen no evidence that this government is able to implement those measures. The Director of Economics at the Caribbean Development Bank, in his remarks recently, made that quite clear, that the challenge that this government has is an implementation one. There's no shortage of policies that it has come up with. But it is in fact the only arm that can execute, and execution is what has failed.
Let me just add to that, Marlon. You cannot midstream, having announced a budget in May of this year, you're not even halfway through the cycle of the year yet, when you are already planning to to revise. Now, once you are, I mean, as I said, this is after 9.5 years. So I want you to bear in mind that if it's taking you 9.5 years of supposedly effort on all the metrics, no matter how you look at them, all the metrics are in the wrong direction. What's supposed to be up is down, what's supposed to be down is up. What difference will this plan make now, given the track record of the last 9.5 years? And what Barbadians have to ask themselves is, seriously, how much more time are you prepared to give the Democratic Labour Party? So, as I made mention, the cost of living has increased substantially over the last few months. So Barbadians have a choice, a very clear choice, because Ms. Motley has already indicated that we will repeal the National Social Responsibility Levy. So the choice for Barbadians is simple. If you vote for the Barbadians Labour Party, we will remove that and the cost of living will immediately be reduced. If you want it to continue at that level, then the choice is yours. But there's a clear choice between both parties, but it has a real impact on the lives of ordinary Barbadians. And that's the message that we really want to say.
At this point, do you think Barbadians really care about a plan?
I think Barbadians care about being able to send their children to school. I think Barbadians care about the road conditions, about whether they can get to work on the bus in the morning, about how much food costs. The last central bank report showed clearly that inflation, the level of prices was on the increase, and that was driven by food inflation. So food is becoming more and more expensive all the time in this country. So Barbadians do care. They care that there's going to be decisive leadership and clear action on creating an environment that is going to allow them to participate in the growth and recovery of this country. And participation is important. We don't just want growth, we want to make sure there's job-led growth. People need to have opportunities, people need to be working in this country again. I think that's what Barbadians care about.
Let me add to that. There are thousands of Barbadians who are CLICO policyholders or British American policyholders. And they have families as well. And they care about having a plan, because people have certainly invested very substantial sums of money into these two companies in some form or fashion, and these people care about a plan, a credible plan that doesn't necessarily expose the wider set of taxpayers to the liabilities incurred by strange decision making. These people care about a plan. Their families also care about a plan. And to the extent that you have a large swath of the Barbadian population being unable to plan their own affairs, that affects the economy. And so therefore we all must be concerned about the fact that this government does not have a credible plan to improve people's lives. All of these things are connected. So your plan, or a plan, has to be credible, and people must see results consistently over time. And what Barbadians have seen certainly over the last 9.5, almost 10 years, is a plan that is leading us over the cliff. And so Barbadians are very concerned about the plan, because our lives have all been made a lot worse because of the lack of a credible plan.
Well, adding to Anessa's question, over the past almost 10 years, there's been many plans and many policies. How longer do you estimate that we can continue in this current trajectory before Barbados hits rock bottom?
Well, I think the immediate response to that question is where the level of reserves happen to be. And as I mentioned earlier, last year during the fourth quarter we lost 4 weeks. And to the extent that the reserve become a real problem, because they're already a problem now, and to the extent that we're able to pay our bills on time, trade with the rest of the world, and all of these affect business in the country. And so therefore I think that as Barbadians now we must be very, very, very careful and understand that our resolve as the Barbados Labour Party to maintain the fixed exchange rate is resolute. And so therefore we will do whatever it takes to ensure that that does not happen. But the policies of the government, if we continue, because as I said, the results are there. If we continue on this path, then it means that the central bank may be placed in a position where it cannot defend the peg.
Yeah, you asked how much longer. The answer to that is no longer. That's a simple answer. This economy is in a recession, and the IMF press release has just suggested that we are going further into a recession. It means that at the household level and at the level of businesses, there's in my constituency, there are many small commercial operators, small business people, and the NSRL is affecting not just at the household level what school uniforms cost or what food costs, but it's affecting the capacity of small business to operate and to survive. Businesses are continually closing across this country because people are not able to stay afloat because of the burden that the NSRL and the additional measures introduced in the last budget have been placing on them. So I don't want us to be fooled by this notion that we can continue on this path. The short answer to that is that we cannot. And I think the press release has made it quite clear that if there is not an immediate correction of these indicators that in growth, in reserves, etc., that Barbados is going to continue to slide further and further and faster. So we actually cannot continue on this path, is the short answer to your question.
I know that there's much work to be done to bring back the economy or take the economy to where it should be. Are you guys ready to sit in the seat as Minister of Finance of this country?
I will say this. This is a team. The 30 of us as current MPs and candidates work together to address the measures that we think are necessary. We are not waiting, nor can we afford to wait until the first day of business to determine what needs to be done. And so as a team, we have made ourselves ready. We have no choice. But I also want to say that it is not just down to the 30 of us to bring this country back. The task before us is so large and so tremendous that it actually takes all of Barbados. It takes the social partnership and a widened social partnership to be able to do what needs to be done in this country. So yes, we are certainly ready, and I hope and I trust that the rest of Barbados is ready as well.
Well, I certainly want to support Marsha in those remarks, but I really want to emphasize the readiness. I think in 9.5 years, we've seen the government's inability to govern. And so our preparation, I think, has been quite different in that we canvass, yes, but we actually are preparing to govern. And as Marsha made the point, we're not waiting until day one, so to speak, before we start looking at the issues. And I think one of the things that will distinguish us in the Barbados Labour Party from the Democratic Labour Party and anybody else for that matter is that we are prepared to deal with this crisis tomorrow if and when the people make that determination. And so therefore, we are very, very confident that Barbados will get out of this situation. But the people of Barbados must make that determination first. And once they do so, we will get set about the task of actually executing the task on behalf of the people. So yes, we are definitely ready.
How do you feel about the central bank's role, what the central bank is doing right now, to aid in the effort to bring that?
The central bank is a very key institution. And I think the one thing that, from my perspective personally, and I'll say this, when I was growing up, whenever the central bank governor spoke, he spoke to the people, or she, as Dr. Williams did, but the governor spoke to the people. There was almost an innate connection between the central bank's governor and the people. So when the governor said to save, you save. When the governor said to tighten your belt, you tighten your belt. And I think that trust between the central bank and the people has been broken. And that has to be repaired because central banks determine through their monetary policy who works and who will not. And so our position as always is that we must make sure that the central bank is as independent as it can be of the political directorate. And that is something that we have to institutionalize again because people must do their job. And I believe that once trust between the central bank and the people can be restored, then we will start to see this economy moving again. Unfortunately, even though with the departure of the previous governor, the impact or the effects of the printing of money still lingers. And to the extent that we now have to resolve that situation, then I think until that is resolved effectively and rolled back, then those impacts will still be there. And so therefore we must do whatever it takes because it does impact the currency peg. And as we've always said, stability in Barbados pretty much hinges around that 2-to-1 currency exchange, and we are going to make sure that all the institutions that are charged with defending that policy position, that they do their job.
I think that the central bank, the governor of the central bank has a role to play, and that's why I think Ryan emphasized the importance of having an independent central bank, has a role to play under the Central Bank Act in making sure that the policies of the Minister of Finance and the government are policies that are in keeping with the good economic health of the country. That's a responsibility, an independent responsibility under the act that the governor has. And I think that's something that the Barbados Labour Party has committed to ensuring through legislation that the central bank is wholly independent. I think the other thing that's going to restore the trust that Ryan has talked about has to do with the publishing of information. We used to feel fairly confident about the reliability and the credibility of data coming out of the central bank. And I think over the years of the last administration, what we've seen is that the reliability that we had come to expect to allow the business community and households to make key decisions has not been there. So it's something that has to be strengthened as part of restoring that trust and making sure that all of the institutions that are responsible for publishing data and for letting Barbadians know what is going on in terms of policy, that all those institutions are transparent, are independent, and that we can come to rely once again on the strength of those numbers.
Are you guys suggesting that the central bank is not politically independent at this time?
Well, if you would recall, the General Secretary of the Democratic Labour Party said quite emphatically that they intend to print as much money as required. Now, if the General Secretary of any political party can issue such a bold statement, then I think that answers your question.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about National Health Insurance Scheme, proposed National Health Insurance Scheme?
The government of Barbados, I'm not sure how to answer that question, because the government of Barbados certainly over the last 2 to 3 years have introduced tax measures specifically aimed at improving the financing of the QEH. And to the extent that that has not effectively happened, then the lack of credibility on that sphere tells me that I'm not sure of their specific intentions when they tout this national health insurance scheme. And so until such time as we can have an open and honest discussion about the financing of healthcare in this country in an open forum, then I'm not prepared to answer questions directly on that. But I think what Barbadians ought to be concerned about specifically right now is that taxes are being levied specifically for health, but we're not seeing any improvements in the provisioning at any of the health facilities across the island. And so therefore, that question in my mind doesn't necessarily fit, because it's not in place right now, because Barbadians are concerned about the quality of health at the moment. And until we can have a discussion on that nationally, I'm not prepared to get into that.
I want to go back a bit. You mentioned about repealing the NSRL. What do you propose government use then to raise revenue? And where do you stand on the issue of going to the IMF for assistance at this time? We hear the version of.
Okay, I'll take it. Well, over the last 9.5 years, this government has introduced tax after tax after tax after tax, and the economy has not grown, which means that the policies have not been focused on generating growth. The Barbados Labour Party has a very strong track record in generating growth in this economy through public policy. And so, to the extent that the National Social Responsibility Levy is retarding growth, it is a hindrance to growth. And so therefore, if it's a hindrance to growth, it's a hindrance to government getting revenue. And so therefore, we must remove that which is hindering growth. And therefore, that is what we intend to do. So long as we are able to do that, it means that the cost of living immediately comes down. The cost of doing business also reduces. Over the course of a 12-month period or so, you then start to see revenues recover because of the natural increase in economic activity that will come from there. Now, there are some other things that we will discuss at a later date, I think, as it relates to generating growth. But there are things, I'm sure Marcia will want to touch on it, but there are other things other than taxation and spending that can generate growth. And I don't know if you want to discuss a few of those right now.
Well, simply to say that there are options in terms of looking at the tax system in its totality. I think the time has come to look at how we are collecting taxes, making sure that the system is efficient and effective. To ensure that there is the burden that does not fall disproportionately on any particular group. I think what we've made clear as a Barbados Labour Party is that the future, what we need to do to turn this economy around, we are not expecting the burden to be shared or to be carried more by one sector than by another. The burden has to be shared equally. And I think overall, when we look at how we are collecting taxes and how we're implementing policy in this country, we have to make sure that that happens, because currently what we have is certain groups carrying more of the burden than others. And so that's something that we have committed to looking at and to ensuring that the incidence of tax does not fall on one group more than the other.
I think with respect to the fund, our commitment is that once it's the will of the people, that when we make our assessments, we will do whatever is legally permitted and morally right in the interest of the country. Ms. Motley reaffirmed that yesterday at the Chamber of Commerce and Industry luncheon, and it's something that the party strongly believes, that we will explore all options available to Barbados, and so long as it's legal and morally right, then we will take the necessary actions as required.
All right. Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you very much.